In the kingdom of Ilmoria, nestled between jagged mountain ranges and vast plains, there was a city known for its shimmering towers and sprawling markets. The city of Valior stood at the center of the kingdom, a beacon of prosperity, but it was also the heart of a secret long forgotten by its people. Beneath the city's bustling streets, hidden in the labyrinthine depths of ancient tunnels, lay the entrance to the Whispering Shadows. Few remembered the name, and even fewer dared to speak it. The Whispering Shadows was a place of legend, a realm where the boundaries between the physical and the spiritual blurred. According to myth, the Whispering Shadows was where the souls of the restless dead wandered, seeking peace or revenge, their voices echoing through the darkness. The entrance was said to be sealed centuries ago, forgotten as the city grew and expanded, but the legends remained, an ominous warning passed down through generations. The people of Valior were content in their ignorance until one fateful day when the shadows began to stir once more. Lyora, a young woman who had spent her life in Valior, was known for her curiosity and her love of the city's rich history. Her mother, an archivist, had passed down to her stories of ancient battles, forgotten kings, and hidden magic. Lyora's days were spent in the archives, poring over dusty tomes and scrolls, searching for the mysteries that had been lost to time. One evening, while organizing a collection of old maps, she came across a parchment that had been tucked away at the bottom of a chest. The map was faded, its edges worn, but it was unmistakably a map of Valior, though the city looked different, older. The towers and walls were there, but beneath them, a network of tunnels and chambers stretched out in all directions. At the center of the map was a symbol she had never seen before, a black circle surrounded by spirals, with a single word written beneath it in ancient script. "Noctis verbum," she whispered, her finger tracing the letters. The words meant nothing to her, but something about the map stirred a deep unease. She quickly rolled it up and placed it in her bag, determined to learn more about its meaning. That night, as she lay in bed, Lyora couldn't shake the feeling that the map was important, perhaps even dangerous. She had seen many maps of Valior, but none that depicted the city as it had been centuries ago, and none that showed the network of tunnels beneath it. The next morning, Lyora went to the Hall of Archives, hoping to find some clue about the symbol and the tunnels. The hall was vast, with rows upon rows of shelves filled with scrolls, books, and artifacts. Lyora had spent most of her life here, learning the ways of the archivists, but today felt different. There was a strange stillness in the air, as if the hall itself was waiting. She made her way to the section of the archives dedicated to ancient Valior and began searching through the oldest texts she could find. Hours passed, and just as she was about to give up, she found a passage in a crumbling book titled The Dark Histories of Ilmoria. The passage spoke of the Whispering Shadows and the Noctis Verbum, which, according to legend, was the seal that kept the shadows at bay. It had been placed at the heart of the city's underground labyrinth to prevent the souls of the dead from crossing into the world of the living. The seal, the text said, had been created by the Order of the Veil, a secret society of mages tasked with protecting Valior from the dark forces that once threatened it. But the most chilling part of the text was the final sentence. "When the seal is broken, the shadows will rise, and the whispers of the dead will once more be heard in the streets of Valior." Lyora's heart raced. Was it possible that the seal had been broken? The idea seemed absurd. This was just an old legend, after all. But something about the map, the symbol, and the passage filled her with dread. Determined to learn more, Lyora left the archives and sought out her friend Tavian, a scholar who specialized in ancient magic. Tavian lived in a modest house near the city's edge, surrounded by books and artifacts he had collected over the years. He was older than Lyora by a decade, but they had become close friends through their mutual love of history. When she arrived, Tavian greeted her with a warm smile. "Lyora, what brings you here so early?" "I found something," she said, handing him the map and explaining what she had learned from the archives. As she spoke, Tavian's expression grew more serious. "This is troubling," he said after a long pause. "The Noctis Verbum, The whispering shadows? These aren't just myths. At least they weren't considered myths when this city was young. The Order of the Veil was real, and they were powerful. If the seal has been broken, as the legends suggest, what do we do? Leora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Tavian stood and began pacing the room. First, we need to find the entrance to the tunnels. If the seal is still intact, we have nothing to worry about. But if it's been damaged... Leora nodded. The map shows the entrance somewhere beneath the old catacombs. The catacombs, Tavian said thoughtfully. It makes sense. The Order would have wanted to hide the seal where no one would think to look, but we need to be careful. If the legends are true, the shadows won't take kindly to anyone disturbing them. That evening, Leora and Tavian made their way to the catacombs, carrying lanterns and supplies for their descent. The catacombs had been sealed off years ago, but Tavian knew of a way in through an old tunnel that had been forgotten by most. The air was cool and damp as they descended into the darkness. The stone walls of the tunnel were slick with moisture, and the silence was oppressive. As they ventured deeper, the passage widened into a vast chamber filled with rows of ancient tombs. The catacombs stretched on for miles, but Leora felt a pull guiding her, just as she had felt when she first found the map. After what felt like hours of navigating the maze of tunnels, they reached a dead end. But something was different about this wall. It was not like the others. Carved into the stone was the same symbol from the map, the black circle surrounded by spirals. "This is it," Leora whispered, her breath catching in her throat. Tavian stepped forward and placed his hand on the symbol. As soon as he touched it, the ground beneath them began to tremble, and the wall slowly slid open, revealing a narrow passage leading downward. Without a word, they descended. The passage was narrow and steep, but eventually it opened into a vast cavern. At the center of the cavern stood a large stone dais, and atop it a single black obelisk. The obelisk was ancient, its surface covered in runes and symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light of their lanterns. "This must be the seal," Tavian said, his voice echoing in the cavern. Leora approached the obelisk cautiously, her heart pounding. The air here felt different, heavier, as if the shadows themselves were watching. As she neared the obelisk, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A crack running down the center of the stone. "The seal, it's broken," she whispered. Suddenly, the shadows in the cavern began to move. At first it was subtle, a ripple in the darkness, but then the shadows began to take shape. Figures emerged, their forms twisted and indistinct, their faces obscured. They whispered as they moved, their voices a cacophony of indistinguishable words. "We need to leave," Tavian said urgently, but as they turned to go, the shadows blocked their path. Leora's mind raced. The seal was broken, and the whispering shadows had been unleashed. But there had to be a way to restore it, to stop the shadows from spreading into the city. "The seal," she muttered, her eyes darting to the obelisk. "There must be a way to fix it." Tavian shook his head. "We don't have the knowledge or power of the Order. We need to get out of here and warn the city." But Leora wasn't listening. She could feel the magic in the air, the ancient power of the seal. The crack in the obelisk was a wound, and wounds could be healed. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her hands on the obelisk. As soon as her skin touched the stone, the whispers grew louder, deafening. The shadows swirled around her, but she didn't pull away. She could feel the magic inside the obelisk, weak but still present. She focused on it, pouring her own energy into the stone, willing it to heal, to close the crack. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, slowly, the crack began to mend. The shadows screamed, their forms dissipating as the seal grew stronger. The obelisk glowed brighter, the runes flickering back to life. The shadows retreated, pulled back into the darkness from which they had come. When it was over, Leora collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Octavian rushed to her side, his face pale with shock. You did it!